today, and they said they can't be here until next week. So
You see
I'm
sometimes.
not gonna take this up until they can be here.
Change the sheets for colors.
There's Tanya. Tanya? All right, can you hear us? You can, okay.
We can't hear you.
We can.
I'm unmuted, sorry. I apologize for the name on the screen. I have to consult with my teenage IT consultant and figure out how to get his name off of my Zoom.
Things like that happen, don't they? Doug is not here. Are you ready to carry this
Yes,
ball? Okay, good.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, then the floor is yours. Senator McCormick, maybe you shut the door because it's getting loud out here. It's starting to sound like appropriations in the budget across the hall.
Okay, so would you like me to start?
Yes, the floor is yours.
All right, so just for the record, Tanya Morehouse, Chief Auditor with the State Auditor's Office. I believe you have a memo that Doug sent over last week.
Yep, it's posted on the website.
Okay, all right. So we just offered a couple of observations for you to consider as you're thinking about Hartford's request for the extension to their debt period and also the time to retain tax increment. And then just a couple of thoughts as well about exactly what the extent of the problem is that they're facing. So in terms of the observations, I think actually you had some conversation about this last week when Hartford was in testifying. But essentially, you know, anytime that you extend the time that tax increment can be retained, you're lengthening the time, right? The tax increment will be diverted away from the education fund. And an additional thing for you to think about is that the TIF statutes are pretty clear that there is risk to the municipalities with this program. So if the tax increment is not sufficient to pay the debt, then the municipality knows it's the one that has to carry the load to repay the debt. And then the last thing to think about is, you know, anytime that you're providing special exemptions or extensions to the municipalities, it can make the statutory parameters a little bit less meaningful, and it can make it a little bit more complex to administer and monitor the program. So with those observations, the other things that you might want to get some information about from Hartford is exactly the magnitude of the problem that they're facing. I don't think they really addressed that very well in their testimony or the memo that they sent over. So I took a look at their most recent report that they submitted to VEPSI because they're required to submit a report annually. And according to that, it looks like they have about 800,000 in tax increment in the bank, which means that their tax increment that they're collecting every year exceeds the amount of the debt payments that they have. So as of June 30, 2021, they had 800,000 in the bank. And unless they had a real huge ratcheting up of debt service payments in 2022, they probably added to that number, I would think, in 2022. So that accumulated tax increment can help them pay for future debt payments. But in terms of the issue that they're actually facing, I don't think they really addressed what their shortfall is. So they provided information about how much more authority they have to borrow, and they said they were facing an issue, but they didn't lay out exactly what the extent of the issue is. So it may be helpful for the committee to ask the town for a forecast that will basically show, well, how much tax increment are you projecting and what are your debt service payments and where does that leave you, and essentially how much is the shortfall. And then in concert with that, you could also ask them to let you know where if you don't provide the extension for the tax increment retention, what will the impact be on their municipal tax rate? Will it really be that severe of an impact to the municipality? And then on the flip side of that, if you do grant it, well, how much tax increment will the Ed Fund forego for the 2.5 years that they've asked for an extension? So it's really, excuse me?
No, I was just gonna say, I think it really hit home when, after they left, I'm not even sure who brought to our attention, this would be their second extension, which we've done one for Windsor, we've got a request from Barry. There may be a reason for one extension because COVID, and then we did a general extension for COVID. So they said, as I'm remembering, I'll look to the committee, that if they didn't get it, there were good projects that wouldn't get done. And I've asked Jill, when she asked them to come in prepared with details, because there was no detail. If they're gonna put up 100 units of affordable housing, giving our housing need, maybe we'll think about it. But that, we don't have that detail, so.
Right. Yeah.
You certainly didn't know that they had 800,000 in the bank.
That's what their most recent report shows. So
Yeah.
basically, they provide VEPSI with information about how much tax increment they have retained every year and what their debt service payments are. So I just did the simple math based on their report, and that's what I got.
Okay.
But it's possible, that they have more debt coming online, and that maybe that 800,000 is already spoken for that debt. It's just they didn't have forecast information in the annual report, so
Okay.
I don't know what their future looks like. But I do think it would be helpful for the committee to understand what is the gap that they think that they have between tax increment that they'll keep for the 20 years that they're allowed versus what their debt service payments will be.
Okay. Yeah, I think when it's a second extension, that to me is getting to be we haven't done many one extensions. That's, to me, setting a precedent, and it will be harder to say no. So.
Right. So they did receive an extension on their debt borrowing period. I think that's the extension that you're referring to, but
Yeah.
None of the TIF districts other than Burlington have received an extension of the tax increment retention period.
Burlington is before us, before the state law. It is an animal unto itself.
Yeah.
This one is the law this committee wrote many years ago, and we're still working out the kinks. But, okay.
Do they pay interest on their debt during the extension?
No.
Would they?
To who? To the bond bank or to the Ed Fund?
To whomever they owe money.
Yeah, yes, you pay interest on a bond.
Do they pay interest on what they're not paying to the Ed Fund that they wouldn't pay if they just paid back their
Can you
bond?
just give me a yes or no answer?
So their debt service payments include interest payments. And so whatever the term of the debt repayment is, yes, they would be paying interest over it. And I imagine that any debt that they take out now, the repayment period is probably going to extend beyond 2034, which is the end date for them to retain tax increment. So yes, they will be paying.
That extended by 2 years too. Okay.
Right.
All right. Any questions? At some point, give you a heads up. We did get a note that the auditor is tied up with another committee and will likely not get free to be here this afternoon. But we have a bill on the project-based TIFs. I'm not gonna ask now, but we will have you in to give us your thoughts on those. My goal is to not increase the risk to the ed fund, that in some way we either cut back or cut out the big TIFs. Right now, the bill is pretty wide open with no limits on anything. I anticipate we'll probably put some limits in there. So any, you know, in your spare time, if you've got anything.
Yes, I've been working on a memo for Doug actually on that. That's S83, right?
Yep, that's it.
Yeah. One thing I talked with him about this morning is, are you interested in conceptual issues, or do you want like the full technical, like kind of these are all the flaws that we see and here's where improvements could be made? Or do you just want like the kind of a broad brush to start with? Because the full, like me going through line by line and saying, hey, this could be clearer, this could be clearer, here's where you could put some guardrails in, that
Well,
takes.
I think both. I mean, just, I think it's fairly clear that towns need some financing mechanism or some, it's almost like gap financing. But you may have a different knowledge of that. And is this the way to do it? So a conceptual, is this the way to do it? Or maybe, no, towns don't need money. They've got all this available. And then we'll go through line by line. I think right now we've got a bill that sounds like it might help towns but we've got to put guardrails around for, you know, to protect the towns, and we've got to put some on to protect the ed fund. Senator McDonald.
So we've been using the expression project-based TIFs. Are there TIFs that are not project-based?
Well, I think they're using that term to make it narrower than the TIF districts, which can include multiple projects. At least that's my sense from my first read through the bill, is that it's one project, right? A much smaller geographic area being covered by that project, as opposed to, you know, the TIF district, which we see like 50 to, I don't know, 150 properties being included in the TIF district. So I don't think there's a great definition yet about the extent of the size of these project-based TIFs, but my sense is that it's intended to be one improvement project, not roadways and streetscape and garage and water sewer. You know, it's one improvement.
And yet, one of the examples given us is that one of the towns wants to put in a wastewater facility, and the bill is, I forget how many millions. But the town can't grow at all if it doesn't do this, but there's only 10 people in the town. So it's that kind of thing we're struggling with. Also, making sure that there's enough technical expertise so the towns figure out what the risks are, because many of them don't have planning and zoning. They got 3 select board members and a clerk treasurer. So
There are several hundred towns in Vermont that are mill pond towns.
Yes.
And who may have as few as 10 houses around the mill pond. And if the dam goes, there's no way that those 10.
you've been to Maple Corners, right?
No, I remember when the
Brookfield,
Dam
yes,
disappeared and the flooding bridge
same.
flooded to the distinctly droopy fashion.
Yes, and Vince found a way to fix that.
That the highway department to do it, it's a state highway.
Yeah, so can I
But
put a
the other-
highway over Curtis Pond?
The other 199 or plus or minus
Yeah,
mill ponds don't have state highways.
no, they don't. But they do need to find a way to fix that dam. I know Curtis Maple Corners, Callis has been doing, they've got a ballot item. But it's on private property. It's always been there, and there was water power in that town, minimal, but there will be a wall of water go through, and
That happens in a couple hours,
yeah,
but then you've got all those waterfront properties that
will be
are no
swallowed,
longer waterfront properties and whose grand list value declines,
exceptionally.
sort of outfill.
Yes.
Outfill.
So, I mean, those, I had thought, but that might be the kind of thing that a TIF could be used for. So I think, yeah, I think we recognize that small towns don't really have the population to affordably finance all of the improvements that they need, because there's been very little money put into infrastructure improvements in years, kind of like schools. So any thoughts you have, we'd be, welcome that. Senator
If I could bring the conversation back to S35 really quick.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm looking at the questions that you have in the auditor's memo, and I'm new to this committee. Would you think that these are standard operating procedure questions for Senate Finance, or would these questions really be evaluated by BEPSI? And to that end, might it make more sense that the extension provided for contemplated in S35 might include BEPSI approval, looking at their plan for repayment, their forecasted tax incremental incomes and debt service plans?
Well, that would probably be a good add-on if you were going to go ahead and basically give them provisional authority, I suppose, and then, kick it over to BEPSI for analysis. But, BEPSI can't go ahead under current statute and do anything with it, right? Because it's a 20-year term in statute. So
And
I think that's why Hartford has come to the legislature, right? And these, the questions that we have laid out there for you to think about asking the town aren't really ones that would require a lot of analysis. It's really just these will give you the measure of how severe the issue is for them.
Yeah, and how much, I'd like to know what projects won't get done. And if it's 100 units of housing, we might want to be a little more lenient than if it's just rehabbing a commercial property. So we will have some questions for them, and any thoughts as we go through the many TIFs would be helpful too. The mini TIFs have been through here. We've taken them out, we put limits on them. They've never made it all the way through. But this is the first time we haven't received them the last week of the session, for the last 2 days. And are gonna have some time to look into them with a little more depth, so that would be helpful.
Okay, well, I know Doug had planned to provide you with some information.
Okay, good. Well, tell him we would welcome that.
Okay,
Thank you.
sure.
All right. Are we off? Tanya's off?
Perfect. Oh, unless, do you have more questions or?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, all right, thank
Okay.
you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Okay, So we're going to have to be very clear that we want to know, well, we've sent the auditor's report, so the town knows, yeah, we sent that last week, yeah, that went down on, I guess it was Friday we did this. And asked them, we didn't vote on it, we asked them to come up and talk to us.
Maybe that's why they want more time. This just crystallizes my concern with this project-based tips at Westford. I love Westford. Westford is 2,000 people and a very small administrative staff. If they had to do something like this, look at Hartford, how much they're struggling with it. My concern is putting too much on the small towns, and that's where I'd love to know how the regional planning commissions can support the smaller towns.
Yeah.
What's interesting about this is I think the fourth time that we've done Westford in this committee on the same issue. I suspect we spent the $5 million already in legislative time trying to resolve this. I wish we could get on with it.
Just give the money.
Maybe that's their plan.
We voted it out of here, it has not made it through. We put
I mean,
some-
it's a sound project. It makes sense. And
as long as they understand they're on the hook.
Yeah.
They don't-
and they do. I mean, we've had them in to testify at least twice that I can recall.
Yeah, no, they've been here both times the bill has been here.
Who's over?
The town.
The town.
What's fundamental to this tip is that the towns have the obligation, their obligation is, the development doesn't occur, but the town still has to pay the bill.
The bill has to pay the bill to the bond banker.
The question is, you know, if the voters authorize it, which they would have to do,
They would have to do.
it's on that.
So, if I may elaborate, in South Burlington, so we've taken on some TIF bonds, 4 so far, and we have another one this March on. And if the development does not occur, and I have to tell voters this, if that growth does not happen in our TIF district, these taxpayers will have to pay the debt that we are committing to put this sewer and this park in, this new Wilson Road cityscape in.
It's like co-signing, like a kid's loan.
So, but
We think that that's gonna, we think that improvement's gonna happen, but we have great confidence because we have good planners that really work with developers. And we have everything
And
we
you've
need.
got- you're in a high demand region. Some of these smaller towns are not. And so, and, you know, the economy goes up and the economy comes down. We know COVID put a crimp in everything. But it's the second loan. I really want to know what's the second extension. That I really want to know what's,
And you're right, there's a precedent. If we extend this one, then I expect others. to
I expect that they would, and that just, as long as they're active, we have a cap on how many big town tips or how many tips we can do at any one time. So if they're just prolonging theirs and extending it, then, and I don't know what the city of Barry is waiting, you know, what project they have that's not done. So, but I think, yes, we need to, because there is concern about, in some areas, about Pepsi's ability as a regulator, that, and as part of this, you can't really be a cheerleader encouraging towns to do this and at the same time be the regulator. It's just, there's just built-in conflicts. And there were a couple things that happened this summer that got joint fiscal very concerned and the state economist very concerned. But I'm not sure how to break that out. We did it with captive insurance and put one person in economic development to be the marketer for bring your insurance company to Vermont. But then DFR regulates. But that DFR actually recognized that conflict and did it on their own. But this one, we have a similar conflict, which we need to think about. Okay, well, I think that's it. I really thought it was starting to look like the old finance committee. We had quite an agenda, but with the folks that couldn't get here today. I think we're all right tomorrow night. Thursday. Oh, Ginger, okay, Allison is not coming in at 3:30? All right, well, maybe we can find, I don't know when it's supposed to start to snow.
I have 4:30 tomorrow.
That's right, I've got a chairs meeting today at 4:30.
Just in time for the start snowing.
Oh, yeah, let's walk through that.
Please don't ask me to speak.
Okay. Keisha,
I can try, but Senator Birch, like,
that's his.
I didn't know it was 90 today, and I need to read up before I can speak out.
Okay, no, we'll just have the drafter walk us through. Okay, yeah, we'll see if we can put that in. Thursday, I've got all state people who I'm assuming can zoom in, but I'm watching the weather. My daughter says you have to have been crazy to have driven down here. Was it last Thursday morning? She said, or Friday, she said it wasn't bad here, but she said up in Swanton, it was
It was
awful.
slippery.
Yeah. They closed schools, yeah,
It's like northern England.
yeah. It was ice, no, not snow, it was ice.
I'm new around here, but why don't we have a snow day? We just all zoom in like we did from the pandemic on Thursday.
That would make sense.
Yeah, drink some hot chocolate, stay home.
I think
We
the
had a
governor has
flood
to
day.
close down state government to do that. We can only do it if it's COVID related. Because I was sitting here yesterday, as my husband's doing his COVID test, saying, am I gonna have to quarantine for 5 days or 10 days? How do I do that? But he doesn't.
We had snow days for COVID. We had to take them up
That's, we went all summer that
into the fall.